And of course, as we near the end of the Apocrypha, it starts to get interesting.
And in my mother's womb was fashioned to be flesh in the time of 10 months, being compacted in blood of the seed of man.
That's right.
Of the seed of man.
The word seed is sperm, and sperm comes through having sex.
It's shut out of your father's rod,
Right.
to put it in layman terms, in his penis.
That's right.
That means a man put his penis in a woman and bust off in it.
Then the angel said to him, "Take out the entrails of this fish, and lay up his heart and his gall and his liver for thee. For these are necessary for useful medicines."
The rest of the chapters of the book of Esther,
Go ahead.
which are found neither in the Hebrew nor in the Chaldee.
Greetings, fellow worker slaves, podcasting at 128 kilobits from the Fortress of Squalitude. This is the Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. I'm your host, Tucker. Professor Fuzznuts is curled up on my coat, and Buttons is bouncing around the house. Yes, it's a podcast hosted by a guy and his cats. Get over it. This is yet another Biblical Apocrypha episode, where Skullbeard and I will be reading from part of 4 Maccabees, which actually is the most interesting thing in the Apocrypha we've read to date. This book is, whoever wrote it was basically trying to apply Greek philosophical principles to, I don't know, well, Christianity. I mean, let's be honest. This book was probably written AD by some Christian who was trying to, give some gravitas to his new religion. Now, the thing that Skullbeard and I noticed about this almost immediately was, hey, there are some statements made in this thing that we can actually agree with. And then, of course, naturally, because it's religious-based, it would soon go off the rails to some degree. And you'll forgive me, but Fuzznuts is up on the keyboard demanding attention. Yes. Poor baby doesn't get to see me very much because I've been working so much. And I have an announcement. I will be at NaNoCon, assuming I can get a ride. They're still not clear on whether or not we're going to be working, but I've just said, fuck it, I'm going. I've been working 60, 70 hours a week for about a month now. I'm fucking burned out. Everybody I work with in my department is pretty much burned out, and all of them have had, they've taken a day off in this entire time. I'm the only person in my department who hasn't missed a day or been late. Well, technically I was late once, but still, most of the other people have been late more times than I have. So I think I can get away with it without too much flack. The ride issue, there's a guy in town who went to NaNoCon last year, and I'm waiting to hear back from him to see if he's going this year. He wasn't certain the last time I checked with him. If he won't take me, I've talked to Heretic Woman, since she's coming down from Kazakhstan, and she'll be willing to haul me there and back, hopefully. One thing I need to point out that this is one of those, why the fuck did you guys do that? NaNoCon is on St. Patrick's Day this year. There are more DUI arrests on St. Patrick's Day than any other day of the year. So if you're going to NaNoCon, not that I think you drink and drive, but you need to be careful going home because there will be a lot of drunks on the road. There will also be a lot of drug or DUI checkpoints that you will have to deal with. I live not too far from one that's routinely set up by the police department. So anybody going home, if you're tired, you're not drunk, expect it to take longer simply because you'll be caught in one of those things and have to wait while they check everybody who's been driving to make sure that they're still sober. Now, unfortunately, this episode will be a little shorter than usual simply because the material Skullbeard and I recorded was nearing the end of one of our marathon recording sessions, and both of us were just getting really burned out and tired. So, I apologize for that. I'll let you hear some of the gabbing that we do when we're done with the stuff as part of that, to make up for the fact that it's so short in material. But like I said, it really is very interesting. It's, because we're going along and it's like, oh, you're so close. Just take that next step. And then, they throw out something and it's like, you lost me, buddy. The one good thing I will say about my working all this overtime is I am really close to paying off my back rent. My biggest handicap is that because there's no bank for no branch for my bank in town, I have to, pull money out of the ATM, and I'm limited to how much I can pull it out at a time, which is kind of annoying, but if you pull too much out at once, you hit a limit, or they flag your account, and then you have to call them and explain to them, yes, that really was me that pulled all this money out of the ATM I usually pull money out of. Not to mention I have to pay a fee every time I use the ATM because, you gotta buy your own money. That's capitalism, though. Something I'm going to mention briefly here that I hope to expand upon in a later episode is I know that there's a lot of folks out there who, a third of my listeners are not based in the U.S. And no doubt you're all panicked as shit about the current president of the United States. And believe me, speaking as someone who lives here, it's worse than you know. This, with the whole thing that's been happening where Trump is saying, well, we're going to enact tariffs because, he wants to give a handful of steel workers more jobs. And, the Europe is talking about retaliating with their own version of tariffs. I was listening to Pod Save America, and they pointed out something that I hadn't thought of. And if you're outside of the U.S. and you kind of want to help tip things to the balance of reason in the United States, this is actually a pretty good idea. Because what the Europeans are talking about is slapping tariffs on things that hurt primarily people in Republican-controlled areas. For example, they're talking about raising tariffs on bourbon. Well, technically, bourbon can be made anywhere in the U.S., but the area that is best known for bourbon is Kentucky, where Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is from and state he represents in the Senate. So that puts a bit of a squeeze on him if that happens. Another is Harley Davidson that they're planning on slapping tariffs on. That hurts Paul Ryan, who is from Wisconsin. So, not that I imagine very many of my listeners are going to be thinking about buying a new Harley Davidson anytime in the near future, but you might want to skip buying bourbon. I know. I love me some bourbon, but I'm going to give it up myself, just to put a little pain on Kentucky so that it's easier for somebody to defeat Mitch McConnell when the election rolls around. And what I want to do on a future episode is pull out things that are, exported from states which are, Republican controlled, that, folks can just stop buying, or if they live in an area. And like one of the things is, I guess, the U.S. exports a lot of soybeans. That mainly goes to Asia. So, might want to, if you're listening to this somewhere in Asia, you might want to see where companies you buy your products from get their soy. If it's U.S. based, maybe switch to somebody who gets it from a different country. I know it doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, it's not dramatic. It's not, big grandiose thing, but every little bit helps. Hillary lost Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. Had she won Wisconsin, she would have won the election. Or it would have been close enough that we might not have ended up with Trump because of finagling in Congress and the Electoral College, et cetera, et cetera. So, little shifts can have a big impact. And also, if you're not aggressively promoting, hey, stop buying these American products, and you just kind of quietly do it, you don't get the people who live in those areas dander up, so they're not, well, screw you, you guys don't like Mitch or whomever, we're going to support him just to piss you off. If, there's an economic downturn that they can't specifically pin on a boycott or tariffs or whatever, then it's more likely people will jump to the alternative candidate, which will be some form of Democrat. I know it's not ideal, but that's the way our system is set up. We have two political parties, and the government is basically rigged so that any third party who tries to get in there is going to have an extremely hard time getting traction. Okay. Anything else before I get to Skullbeard and I reading from the Apocrypha? I'm trying to think. Oh, well, it's not major. It's one little minor thing I'll add before we slide into the Apocrypha. You may, well, one way or another, you will actually be noticing a few changes to the audio quality of the podcast. There has been a microphone that I've had my eye on for a very long time. It's one of these really high-end microphones, and it's, my interest in it is more because it looks pretty. But that's the most important thing, really, than improving the audio quality. And I happened to notice that, it's getting hard to find online, so I went ahead and ordered it, got it, and realized I need to get some other equipment to set it up and have it work properly. So that equipment, thankfully, was very cheap. I've got that on order, and it'll be here sometime this week, and if I have a chance, next week you will notice an audio difference. One of the things that it will enable me to do is cut out some of the time I spend on editing, which will free me up to do more time on the pre-production side of things, so I can do a little bit better on the stories and things like that. And ideally, it'll allow me to add things into the show that I haven't been able to do. Just being able to cut down on some of my editing time will be a huge help, because there have been things that I've wanted to do, and it's like I can't do it because I just don't have the time to edit that in. So we will see how it goes. If I'm lucky, it will be a fantastic thing and everything will work perfectly right out of the box. I'm not going to hold my breath on that. But you never know. All right. Here is Skullbeard and I reading from 4 Maccabees. And like I said, this is actually interesting. Give it a listen for a little while. I know some of you probably listen to the intros on the Apocrypha episodes and just skip to the end. But listen to the first part of this and see if you're not amazed. And I will say it's probably obvious why this got deleted from the rest of the Apocrypha as well as the Bible, because it starts putting you in a direction where, wow, somebody follows the logic of all this. They're probably not going to stay religious for very long. So, but you'll hear that here in just a second. Oh, and one thing I do need to apologize for. There's a few moments where you can hear some weird noise in the background on Skullbeard's end. It's only just for a few seconds. I've cleaned up what I could. It's because it was really fucking cold in Canada when we were recording this, and this furnace kept kicking on. So,
the subject that I am about to discuss is most philosophical. That is, whether devout reason is sovereign over the emotions. So it is right for me to advise you to pay earnest attention to philosophy. Hey, this has got a different tone.
yeah.
For the subject is essential to everyone who is seeking knowledge, and in addition, it includes the praise of the highest virtue. I mean, of course, rational judgment. I'm almost getting into this.
Yeah, this will be interesting to see how they twist themselves to justify a lot of the things in the Bible.
I feel some apologetics coming on. If, then, it is evident that reason rules over those emotions that hinder self-control, namely gluttony and lust. Ooh. All right, you go.
It is also clear that it masters the emotions that hinder one from justice, such as malice, and those that stand in the way of courage, namely anger, fear, and pain. Some might perhaps ask, if reason rules the emotions, why is it not sovereign over forgetfulness and ignorance? Their attempted argument is ridiculous. Well, that's a bit of a non sequitur. For reason does not rule its own emotions, but those that are opposed to justice, courage, and self-control. And it is not for the purpose of destroying them, but so that one may not give way to them.
I'm actually quite tempted to drop a link to for&nbsp on Twitter. I could prove to you from many and various examples that reason is dominant over the emotions, but I can demonstrate it best from the noble bravery of those who died for the sake of virtue, Eleazar and the 7 brothers and their mother. All of these, by despising sufferings that bring death, demonstrated that reason controls the emotions.
On this anniversary, it is fitting for me to praise their virtues, those who, with their mother, died for the sake of nobility and goodness. But I would also call them blessed for the honor in which they are held. Remember, these are the ones that, they had their tongues cut out, their arms cut off, their skin flayed, etc.
And then fried up in a giant pan. Yeah. I remember. I don't know if I can ever forget.
For all people, even their torturers, marveled at their courage and endurance. But this has nothing to do with reason, and they became the cause of the downfall of tyranny over their nation. Not really. By their endurance, they conquered the tyrant, and thus their native land was purified through them. Well, this has obviously taken a turn for the worse. I shall shortly have an opportunity to speak of this, but, as my custom is, and who the fuck are you? I shall begin by stating my main principle, and then I shall turn to their story, giving glory to the all-wise God.
It's always opposite day in Jesus' land. Our inquiry, accordingly, is whether reason is sovereign over the emotions. We shall decide just what reason is and what emotion is, how many kinds of emotions there are, and whether reason rules over all these. Now, reason is the mind that with sound logic prefers the life of wisdom. Like, some of this I'm totally on board with.
Yeah. Wisdom next is the knowledge of divine and human matters and the causes of these. That's a little iffy, but not too terribly erroneous. This, in turn, is education in the law, by which we learn divine matters reverently and human affairs to our advantage. Now, the kinds of wisdom are rational judgment, justice, courage, and self-control.
Rational judgment is supreme over all of these, since by means of it reason rules over the emotions. The two most comprehensive types of the emotions are pleasure and pain, and each of these is by nature concerned with both body and soul. The emotions of both pleasure and pain have many consequences.
Thus desire precedes pleasure, and delight follows it. Fear precedes pain, and sorrow comes after. Anger, as a man will see if he reflects on this experience, is an emotion embracing pleasure and pain.
I think this was written by a Buddhist.
Could be.
It reads like a Buddhist.
Yeah.
In pleasure, there exists even a malevolent tendency, which is the most complex of all the emotions. In the soul, it is boastfulness, covetousness, thirst for honor, rivalry, and malice. In the body, indiscriminate eating, gluttony, and solitary gormandizing. What the hell is that? I'm going to have to look that one up.
Yeah. Just as pleasure and pain are two plants growing from the body and the soul, so there are many offshoots of these plants, each of which the master cultivator reason weeds and prunes and ties up and waters and thoroughly irrigates, and so tames the jungle of habits and emotions. For reason is the guide of the virtues, but over the emotions it is sovereign. No, actually it is not, unfortunately. If it were, we'd all be Spock. Observe now, first of all, that rational judgment is sovereign over the emotions by virtue of the restraining power of self-control.
Yeah, gormandizing is indulge in good eating, eat greedily. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, I kind of like that shit. Self-control, then, is dominance over the desires. Some desires are mental, others are physical, and reason obviously rules over both. Otherwise, how is it that when we are attracted to forbidden foods we abstain from the pleasure to be had from them? Is it not because reason is able to rule over appetites? I, for one, think so. Therefore, when we crave seafood and fowl, and animals of all sorts of foods that are forbidden to us by the law, we abstain because of domination by reason. For the emotions of the appetites are restrained, checked by the temperate mind, and all the impulses of the body are bridled by reason.
Okay, why would you have a craving for seafood that you've never had?
Well, you know, shrimp is good food.
Yeah, but it's not kosher, so they wouldn't have eaten it.
Bacon-wrapped shrimp?
Really not kosher, but... Yeah. And why is it amazing that the desires of the mind for the enjoyment of beauty are rendered powerless? It is for this reason, certainly, that the temperate Joseph is praised, because by mental effort he overcame sexual desire. For when he was young and in his prime for intercourse, by his reason he nullified the frenzy of the passions. Well, Onan kind of did as well, and saw what happened to him.
Yeah. Not only is reason proved to rule over the frenzied urge of sexual desire, but also over every desire. Thus the law says, "You shall not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that is your neighbor's." In fact, since the law has told us not to covet, I prove to you all the more that reason is able to control desires. Just so it is with the emotions that hinder one from justice.
Yeah, but pretty much, as somebody's pointed out, if people didn't covet things, our economy would collapse.
Yep, pretty much. It's not the American way.
Otherwise, how could it be that someone who is habitually a solitary gormandizer, a glutton, or even a drunkard can learn a better way, unless reason is clearly lord of the emotions? Thus, as soon as a man adopts a way of life in accordance with the law, even though he is a lover of money, he is forced to act contrary to his natural ways and to lend without interest to the needy and to cancel the debt when the 7th year arrives. If one is greedy, he is ruled by the law through his reason, so that he neither gleans his harvest or gathers the last grapes from the vineyard. In all other matters, we can recognize that reason rules the emotions. That makes no fucking sense whatsoever, and certainly does not reflect upon reality.
Well, there's a couple of non sequiturs there, but reason ruling over emotions is kind of how I try to approach my life, and how a reasonable person would. So, yeah, this is profoundly unchristian. No wonder it got cut. For the law prevails even over affection for parents, so that virtue is not abandoned for their sakes. It is superior to love for one's wife, so that one rebukes her when she breaks the law. It takes precedence over love for children, so that one punishes them for misdeeds. Oh yeah, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah. It is sovereign over the relationship of friends, so that one rebukes friends when they act wickedly. Do not consider it paradoxical when reason, through the law, can prevail even over enmity. The fruit trees of the enemy are not cut down, but one preserves the property of enemies from the destroyers and helps raise up what has fallen. The Carthage city fathers would disagree on that one.
Yeah, nuke and pave.
It is evident that reason rules even the more violent emotions, lust for power, vainglory, boasting, arrogance, and malice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who this reminds me of. For the temperate mind repels all these malicious emotions just as it repels anger, for it is sovereign over even this. When Moses was angry with Dathan and Abiram, he did nothing against them in anger, but controlled his anger by reason. For, as I have said, the temperate mind is able to get the better of the emotions, to correct some, and to render others powerless.
Yeah, I've got to,
Fuck off.
Okay, yeah, I figured this was who it was, and I had to look it up. Okay. Abraham and Dathan joined the Korah in the conspiracy against Moses and Aaron. He and all the conspirators with their families and possessions were swallowed up by the ground. Numbers 16, 1 to 40, 26, 9 to 11, Psalms 106, 17. So, yeah, and it has to be him. Well, even if it's not him, it could be another one who was the second eldest son of Hielal, the Bethelite, who perished prematurely in consequence of his father's undertaking to build Jericho. So obviously, since there's no mention of Moses, it couldn't be this guy. So, you know, it's like, well, Moses was a pretty chill dude, but actually, that's, you know, the implication from that is, yeah, Moses was a cool dude, but it wasn't, you know, this guy didn't come to a happy end.
No happy endings.
Yeah.
I'm not liking that book.
Why else did Jacob, our most wise father, censure the households of Simeon and Levi for their irrational slaughter of the entire tribe of the Shechemites, saying, "Cursed be their anger"? I don't know. For if reason could not control anger, he would not have spoken thus. But he's not the direct actor in this situation. It's the other people who apparently were not governed by reason. Now, when God fashioned man, he planted in him emotions and inclinations.
Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. But at the same time, he enthroned the mind among the senses as a sacred governor over them all. To the mind he gave the law, and one who lives subject to this will rule a kingdom that is temperate, just, good, and courageous. How is it then, one might say, that if reason is master of the emotions, it does not control forgetfulness and ignorance? These guys are getting into some serious epistemology.
Yeah. Formac 3. This notion is entirely ridiculous, for it is evident that reason rules not over its own emotions, but those of the body. No one of us can eradicate that kind of desire, but reason can provide a way for us not to be enslaved by desire. No one of us can eradicate anger from the mind, but reason can help to deal with anger. I can't argue with that at all.
Yep. No one of us can eradicate malice, but reason can fight at our side so that we are not overcome by malice. For reason does not uproot the emotions, but is their antagonist. Now, this can be explained more clearly by the story of King David's thirst.
For young boys. David had been attacking the Philistines all day long, and together with the soldiers of his nation had slain many of them. Then when evening fell, he came, phrasing, sweating and quite exhausted.
Hey, phrasing!
To the royal tent, around which the whole army of our ancestors had encamped. Now all the rest were at supper.
But the king was extremely thirsty, and although springs were plentiful there, he could not satisfy his thirst from them. But a certain irrational desire for the water in the enemy's territory tormented and inflamed him, undid and consumed him. When his guards complained bitterly because of the king's cravings, two staunch young soldiers, respecting the king's desire,
phrasing,
armed themselves fully, and taking a pitcher, climbed over the enemy's ramparts.
Eluding the sentinels at the gates, they went searching throughout the enemy camp, and found the spring, and from it boldly brought the king a drink. But David, although he was burning with thirst, considered it an altogether fearful danger to his soul to drink what was regarded as the equivalent of blood.
Therefore, opposing reason to desire, he poured out the drink as an offering to God. For the temperate mind can conquer the drives of the emotions and quench the flames of frenzied desires. It can overthrow bodily agonies even when they are extreme, and by nobility of reason spurn all domination by the emotions.
The present occasion now invites us to a narrative demonstration of temperate reason. At a time when our fathers were enjoying profound peace, well, when has that ever been in the Bible? Because of their observance of the law, and were prospering, so that even Seleucus Nicanor, king of Asia, had both appropriated money to them for the temple service and recognized their commonwealth. Just at that time, certain men attempted a revolution against the public harmony and caused many and various disasters.
Yeah, that sounds like it's about par for the course. Formac 4. Now there was a certain Simon. Simple Simon? Did he Pieman, I wonder? A political opponent to the noble and good man Onias, who then held the high priesthood for life. When, despite all manner of slander, he was unable to injure Onias in the eyes of the nation, he fled the country with the purpose of just betraying it. So he came to Apollonius, governor of Syria, Phoenicia, and Cilicia, and said, I have come here because I am loyal to the king's government to report that in the Jerusalem treasuries there are deposited tens of thousands in private funds, which are not the property of the temple, but belong to King Seleucus.
When Apollonius learned the details of these things, he praised Simon for his service to the king, and went up to Seleucus to inform him of the rich treasure. On receiving authority to deal with the matter, he proceeded quickly to our country, accompanied by the accursed Simon and a very strong military force. He said that he had come with the king's authority to seize the private funds in the treasury.
The people indignantly protested his words, considering it outrageous that those who had committed deposits to the sacred treasury should be deprived of them, and did all that they could to prevent it. But, uttering threats, Apollonius went on to the temple. While the priests, together with the women and children, were imploring God in the temple to shield the holy place that was being treated so contemptuously.
And while Apollonius was going up with his armed forces to seize the money, angels on horseback with lightning flashing from their weapons appeared from heaven, instilling in them great fear and trembling. Then Apollonius fell down half dead in the temple area that was open to all, stretched out his hands toward heaven, and with tears besought the Hebrews to pray for him and propitiate the wrath of the heavenly army. For he said that he had committed a sin deserving of death, and that if he were delivered, he would praise the blessedness of the holy place before all people.
Moved by these words, Onias the high priest, although otherwise he had scruples about doing so, prayed for him, lest King Seleucus suppose that Apollonius had been overcome by human treachery and not by divine justice. So Apollonius, having been preserved beyond all expectations, went away to report to the king what had happened to him. When King Seleucus had died, his son Antiochus Epiphanes succeeded to the throne, an arrogant and terrible man,
who removed Onias from the priesthood and appointed Onias's brother Jason as the high priest. Jason agreed that if the office were conferred upon him, he would pay the king 3,660 talents annually. So the king appointed him high priest and ruler of the nation, which is what a Messiah, according to Judaism, is. You are a high priest and the king of the country. You're not the guy that shows up and, heals people.
Alrighty then. Jason changed the nation's way of life and altered its form of government in complete violation of the law, so that not only was a gymnasium constructed at the very citadel of our native land, but also the temple service was abolished. The divine justice was angered by these acts and caused Antiochus himself to make war on them.
For when he was warring against Ptolemy in Egypt, he heard that a rumor of his death had spread and that the people of Jerusalem had rejoiced greatly. He speedily marched against them, and after he had plundered them, he issued a decree that if any of them should be found observing the ancestral law, they should die. When, by means of his decrees, he had not been able in any way to put an end to the people's observance of the law, but saw that all his threats and punishments were being disregarded, even to the point that women, because they had circumcised their sons, were thrown headlong from the heights along with their infants, though they had known beforehand that they would suffer this. When then his decrees were despised by the people, he himself, through torture, tried to compel everyone in the nation to eat defiling foods and to renounce Judaism. I'm not seeing a whole lot of reason here in any of this.
Yeah, I think they seem to have lost the plot.
Yeah.
Whatever. Form Act 5. The tyrant Antiochus, sitting in state with his counselors on a certain high place and with his armed soldiers standing about him, ordered the guards to seize each and every Hebrew and to compel them to eat pork and food sacrificed to idols. If any were not willing to eat defiled food, they were to be broken on the wheel and killed. Broken on the wheel. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, but I don't think that torture existed at this point in time.
I don't think so either. I thought that was some medieval shit.
Yeah. Let's just look that up.
Oh yeah, breaking on the wheel. That's some cruel ass shit.
Yeah. Yeah. 6th century is like apparently.
Can I guess that this is an interpolation?
I think you can.
Figured as much.
Yeah. But.
Some cruel motherfuckers.
Yeah. But yeah, they're listing for it that Wikipedia has is the 6th century, so that's quite after this period of time, since this was supposedly 150 thereabouts BCE.
I'm guessing this was added later.
Yeah, assuming that the whole book wasn't written much later.
Actually, the first 3 chapters of this seem to be a short course in apologetics. It is what it is.
Yep. And when many persons had been rounded up, one man, Eleazar by name, leader of the flock, was brought before the king. He was a man of priestly family, learned in the law, advanced in age, and known to many in the tyrant's court because of his philosophy. When Antiochus saw him, he said, "Bring us out thou thy holy hand grenade." No. "Before I begin to torture you, old man, I would advise you to save yourself by eating pork.
I suggest bacon wrapped shrimp, but whatever.
Yeah.
For I respect your age and your gray hairs, although you have had them for so long a time, it does not seem to me that you are a philosopher when you observe the religion of the Jews. Why, when nature has granted it to us, should you abhor eating the very excellent meat of this animal? It is senseless not to enjoy delicious things that are not shameful, and wrong to spurn the gifts of nature. Because everything's better with bacon."
Yeah, and really, there is a loophole that a lot of Jews use. It's that if you get into the absolute splitting hairs of things, you're not allowed to consume pork in your own house. It's perfectly okay to consume it elsewhere.
Really?
Yeah, that's the rationalization they use for eating Chinese on Christmas.
Ah. Okay. Yeah, that's totally cool. The Jews are like famous for being able to rationalize just about fucking anything they want.
Yeah. Have you seen Bill Maher's documentary Religulous?
Absolutely, I love that show.
Yeah, where and he's like, wouldn't it just be easier to get an electric wheelchair rather than do it? Oh no, you think God's buying this shit? For consider this, that if there is some power watching over this religion of yours, it will excuse you from any transgression that arises out of compulsion. When the tyrant urged him in this fashion to eat meat unlawfully, Eleazar asked to have a word. And that word is, When he had received permission to speak, he began to address the people as follows.
"We, O Antiochus, who have been persuaded to govern our lives by the divine law, think that there is no compulsion more powerful than our obedience to the law. Therefore, we consider that we should not transgress it in any respect. Even if, as you suppose, our law were not truly divine, and we had wrongly held it to be divine, not even so would it be right for us to invalidate our reputation for piety.
Therefore, do not suppose that it would be a petty sin if we were to eat defiling food. To transgress the law in matters either small or great is of equal seriousness. For in either case the law is equally despised."
You scoff at our philosophy as though living by it were irrational. but it teaches us self-control so that we master all pleasures and desires, so that it trains us in courage, so that we endure any suffering willingly. It instructs us in justice, so that in all our dealings we act impartially, and it teaches us piety, so that with proper reverence we worship the only real God.
Therefore, we do not eat defiling foods, for since we believe that the law was established by God, we know that in the nature of things, the Creator of the world, in giving us the law, has shown sympathy toward us. He has permitted us to eat what will be most suitable for our lives, but he has forbidden us to eat meats that would be contrary to this. It would be tyrannical for you to compel us not only to transgress the law, but also to eat in such a way that you may deride us for eating defiling foods, which are most hateful to us. How can you say that about bacon?
I know. That's brutal. But you shall have no such occasion to laugh at me, nor will I transgress the sacred oaths of my ancestors concerning the keeping of the law, not even if you gouge out my eyes and burn my entrails.
I am not so old and cowardly as not to be young and reason on behalf of piety. Therefore get your torture reels ready, and fan the fire more vehemently. I do not so pity my old age as to break the ancestral law by my own act.
I will not play false to you, O law that trained me, nor will I rejoice you beyond beloved self-control. I will not put you to shame, philosophical reason, nor will I reject you, honored priesthood and knowledge of the law. You, O king, shall not stain the honorable mouth of my old age, nor my long life lived lawfully. That's some lovely alliteration they got going on there. The fathers will receive me as pure, as one who does not fear your violence even to death. You may tyrannize the ungodly, but you shall not dominate my religious principles either by word or by deed. Yeah, dude. This fucking apologetics. The most dishonest religious tradition I know of.
And I still don't see how you can think calling it apologetics is a positive.
Not in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. Can we put a pin in this? Because I'm a little burned out.
Really?
Yeah.
We're up to 4 6. We knocked out 4 3 in one sitting, so yeah, I'm good with the progress we've made so far.
Yeah. I mean, because this is this is probably the best thing we've read. It's still not great, but it's better than.
So far, this is the best thing we've read, and some of it makes sense, and some of it I agree with, but some of it's pretty fucking awful.
Yeah.
What did I say in that email to you? Gmail. That's the nice thing about running Chrome on a crackbook. Everything's right there for me. Okay, it wasn't the already then let's fire up that bad boy. It was the one before that. Bloody hell. Don't like the way it nests messages though. Yeah, what did I say about this? Come on, scroll, motherfucker. So let it be written, so let it be some of the dumbest shit I've ever read.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Yeah. All right. Ping me on Messenger, or not Messenger, Hangouts. When you want to knock out some more of this, you should have enough for, 2 shows at least?
3, probably. Hopefully that'll be enough. We'll see.
You should have enough for a Patreon episode in there, too.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hail Sagan.
Yep.
And, yeah.
We'll talk soon.
You betcha.
All right.
I'm back for more. Button for punishment.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too.
That's it for this episode of The Atheist in the Trailer Park Podcast. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Stitcher, as well as just about anywhere else podcasts can be found. Many of the episodes are also on YouTube. Follow the show on Twitter. @TParkAtheist is the show's Twitter handle. It's on Facebook at facebook.com/trailerparkatheist.com. If you happen to like the podcast, please rate it on iTunes. If you'd like to support the podcast, there's a donate button on the show notes page. You can support it via Patreon at patreon.com/TNTucker. Thanks for listening.
Say goodnight, Fosnuts.
All I know is this violates every canon of respectable broadcasting.
Damned cat.